we have roll call, please?
Chair Lipp,
Here?
Vice Chair Crawford,
Here.
Board Member Corning,
Here.
Board Member Harris,
Here.
Board Member Joyce, and let the record reflect that the two alternate board members, Veronica Close and Burns Dion, are not present.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Mr. Manager, do you have anything to update?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. In terms of approving your agenda, there's just one item that was inadvertently omitted. As you know, it should have happened last month, every April, the board should go ahead and revisit its officers for this coming year. So if you would tonight, we'd like you to hold the election for chair and vice chair for this year.
Okay, so we'll have that as one agenda that be new business.
It's not listed, you can do it, if you wanted to do it as a perfunctory matter, you can do it in the opening, or you can hold it
Let's
off.
just have it as number 4. Let's go ahead and approve the minutes from last time. We'll do it as 4.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Okay, I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made by Mr. Crawford, second by Ms. Joyce. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to minutes. Any comments on the minutes?
I wasn't present at the meeting, so I will not be voting on the minutes.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve?
So you want to use the...
I don't know if they're accurate though.
This comes up every time somebody visits a meeting, they're supposed to vote.
Yeah. Okay, motion to approve?
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Rob Crawford, second by Mr. Harris. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Soft.
So we're opposed. Or are you for?
I'm aye. Got 2 ayes. 2 ayes.
2 ayes, 4, 3, 4. Okay. 4-1 approved. Okay, new business, electing new officers, which would be chair and vice chair.
I'd like to make a motion, we keep it exactly the same.
Is there a second? Okay, second. Without objection.
Wow, one motion.
No discussion.
No discussion?
No discussion, without objection, so approved. Okay, we're appearing tonight as a local planning agency, LPA, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item up for consideration tonight is an application by Big Dog Rescue Incorporated that is an application to amend section 20-015 of the Unified Land Development Code permitted uses to include veterinarian services and dog boarding as permitted accessory uses. Big Dog Ranch is an existing animal rescue shelter that's located in the unincorporated area, and for, I guess, a variety of reasons, they have to relocate. And Loxash Groves is one of the areas that they're interested in relocating in. And in order to assist in gaining the appropriate permits for what they propose to do, they're proposing that we add a couple of accessory uses to the AR, Agricultural Residential District, to include accessory uses that they intend to do on the site if they decide to locate in the town. If you turn to page 17 of 21, that's attachment A, that is the proposed amendment as it's currently written by the application by Big Dog. Though the two tables on page 17 are the existing tables for permit principal uses and accessory uses allowed in the agricultural residential district. The proposed amendment is to add two accessory uses, the two at the bottom of the accessory uses table, veterinary services and dog boarding. Staff really doesn't have any kind of an issue with the application as it's proposed. However, the staff does have an alternative proposal, and that is oriented primarily to avoid any future confusion as to where veterinary and dog boarding uses could be located in the town. The amendment as it's proposed in attachment A on page 19, on page 17, would allow any of the principal uses in the top table to try to make a case as to why veterinary services or dog boarding facilities could go as an accessory use associated with the principal use. And we don't really think that dog boarding, for example, is an appropriate accessory use for a single-family dwelling or other uses in the AR district. So in order to ensure that there's no confusion and that the veterinary accessory use and the dog boarding are located appropriately with the appropriate principal allowed uses, staff is proposing an alternative amendment which starts on page 19 of 21 of the staff report. If you look at the top table under principal uses, go down to rescued animal care. Rescued animal care is currently an allowed principal use subject to receiving a special exception. And we are proposing that that language be amended to say that rescued animal care is permitted subject to Article 80 as well as a special exception. Article 80 is a section in the town's code where we apply conditions to specific uses. And if you look on page 20 of 21, those are the special conditions that we are proposing be applied to the rescued animal care use. At the top of the page, we essentially start out with a definition of what a rescued animal care facility is. It's possible that this is not necessarily the most appropriate location for a definition of the use, and when we're making our amendments to the ULDC, we'll probably move this up to the definitions section and take it out of 80, but just so we have the entire amendment under one section, at least at this point, we're recommending that we start out with the definition. And following that, we state that rescued animal care still has to get a special exception, and then we also have six areas where we list special exceptions. The minimum plot size has to be 5 acres. And the veterinary services and outdoor boarding, veterinary services and dog boarding, can be allowed as accessory uses. That makes it very clear that the proposed uses in the applicant's amendment are accessory uses that are attached specifically to rescue animal care facilities. We also have in there that this use could have an accessory residential building in case a caretaker's quarter is desired in the facility. And then next we get into waste disposal. Waste disposal has to be done in a manner consistent with Palm Beach County environmental rules and all applicable rules of the Palm Beach County Health Department and Palm Beach County Solid Waste Authority. Item E at the bottom of page 20. There is going to be a restriction on the number of animals, and that restriction will essentially be determined by applying the rules of the Palm Beach County Animal Control Center limitations that are in effect for Palm Beach County facilities. It'll essentially be determined by the size of the property and by the size of the shelter itself. They have square footage and acre requirements. So we don't really know at this point how many animals would be proposed on a particular site if they choose to locate in Loxahatchee Grove, but that will come out during the special exception approval process. And then on page 21, we have some regulations for outdoor runs to address some potential issues that were raised when this proposal was discussed at the town council meeting last month. We've included a provision that outdoor runs have to be located a minimum of 200 feet from any abutting residential districts, and they must be enclosed by a 6-foot-high chain link fence and a continuous 4-foot opaque hedge around the outside of the fence, and that the outdoor runs shall not be used earlier than 7 a.m. or later than 8 p.m. 7 days a week. And finally, that the architectural treatment has to be consistent with the town's rural vista guidelines. So, see, the staff recommendation is considerably more involved than the applicant's request. Although we feel that the staff proposal affords the town better protection, including where these accessory facilities can be located and how they're going to be developed and operated. So, going over to page 15 of the staff report, and Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I know you don't want me to read stuff out of the staff report, but staff findings, staff
You
recommendations.
can't have lived this.
I want to read those for the record. The staff findings, and quoting here, planning staff finds the proposed alternative text amendment proposed by staff to be generally consistent with the intent and direction of the Loxahatchee Groves Comprehensive Plan and the review criteria for a text amendment listed in section 160-020 of the ULDC. Staff further finds that the text amendment proposed by the applicant is not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and the ULDC text amendment review criteria. And that is in there in case the P&Z board wants to recommend approval of the applicant proposal as opposed to staff. We can support either one. We would highly recommend that the staff proposal be the one that's recommended by P&Z. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the proposed alternative text amendment as presented in attachment B. However, staff can also support the applicant's proposed text amendment as presented in subject A, subject to the following revision. Rather than stating that veterinarian services and dog boarding are permitted accessory uses and leaving it at that, we would suggest that they be allowed as permitted accessory uses to rescue animal care uses only. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation unless you have any questions.
Probably a couple questions until we hear from the applicant. Does the applicant have a presentation?
I do, but I'm going to make it short. Good evening, Jeff Brophy, agent for Big Dog Ranch. I'm sorry, I'm going to be talking behind you. I have a PowerPoint presentation and a short video. I'm going to be as brief as I can. Did I turn off? There we go. First, I want to mention that after we had submitted the application to staff, we've since talked to Jim about his recommendations, and we're in agreement with with his proposal, the alternative change. So since the submittal, we're in agreement with those additional changes that Jim highlighted. Never goes out. I'm going to breeze through some things. There's a lot of things that Jim already mentioned, and I don't want to waste time with that. But obviously before us today, here's the code change request to allow vet services and dog boarding accessory to the rescued animal care in the AR district. And I just wanted to emphasize that the rescued animal care is already allowed by code within the AR district. These are the accessory uses that will allow Big Dog to provide additional revenue rather than just the regular donations, and provide service to the community. To give you some background, Big Dog, it's a nonprofit. Currently, it's located at the former site of the Folk Peterson Wildlife Sanctuary. It is a no-kill facility, and whose mission is to push Palm Beach County towards being a no-kill county in terms of the euthanization of dogs. They rescue, care for, and adopt out the dogs on site. And currently, they rely solely on donations, which is affects them in their current location and affects them coming into a different municipality as well. As I mentioned, the accessory uses will allow for the additional funds. Just to give you some context of where they are, they have a 28-acre property right now. About 4 of it is actually usable, and what is actually part of the rescue. You can see Southern Boulevard to the top, State Road 7 to the east, and access is through Acme Road off of State Road 7 in behind Lowe's there. On the site right now, there's the reason why it's so small is, number one, is the rescue is actually accessory to the agricultural use. They have a lot of preserve on the site, and there's a large FPL easement that runs through it as well. Currently, the properties within Palm Beach County, the issue is that they cannot make improvements. At the current location, it was grandfathered in as the wildlife sanctuary. So they can't make improvements because of that grandfathering, and the animal rescue is actually accessory to the agricultural use. Because of that, they can't have additional accessory uses on top of what they already have with the rescue. Another issue is the limited availability of properties within Palm Beach County. We've looked at other areas within unincorporated, and it's difficult to find because really the dog rescue within the county is limited to industrial sites, which are hard to come by for the size that we're looking for. In addition, the current buildings on the site are not designed for dogs. They were designed for the wildlife sanctuary, and what the rescue is really looking to do is find a new site that we can have new construction to allow for these dogs to have the appropriate living conditions. Just to give you a little history on the location, there has been no location currently identified. Most property within the town is within the AR district, which we're requesting the change to. And we understand, I think staff understands that each property is different, is going to require a different approach to the design of the facility, which is why I know Jim included some of those additional conditions, which again we're in support of. When we do finally get to that step, we plan on utilizing community outreach during our site selection, design, and development to make sure it's designed properly to within the context of that specific site. And the reason why we're before you with this code change as we move forward, because we want to know whether the town supports this facility before a location is determined, before a lot of the things like contracts and consultants are started to get involved. Because obviously, being a nonprofit, funding is always something that they try to keep an eye on. So we just want to make sure that where we're going is going to be something that is going to be accepted. Briefly, the new facility will be designed specifically for the housing, boarding, and vet services of the dogs. It's the intent to have the dogs housed in an air-conditioned indoor environment with some outdoor play. The outdoor runs will have setbacks from the residents, which Jim had mentioned. There's also going to be substantial buffering, screening, and setbacks. And the fact is that right now Big Dog has several major donors in place at this time to make this new construction a reality for them. And so the value to the community, they really emphasize community outreach with schools. They go out to schools and educate children on the importance of caring for the dogs and the no-kill mantra that they have. They also have vets on site that help with the rehabilitation, special needs, kids and adults. They also have a lot of local volunteers that come out, and they also do police training. It's also going to offer an employment opportunity. Right now they have 32 employees, and obviously that would be a benefit to the community. And the plan is, because they're a nonprofit, to offer affordable vet and boarding services to the community. When you go to a two-profit, a lot of times the vet services end up so expensive that the owners have no choice but to euthanize the pet. And that's something that goes against what Big Dog is trying to accomplish. That's why they really try to, or they want to provide for that affordable vet and boarding services. And we believe it fits within the ideals and character of Loxahatchee Groves. And in conclusion, we do agree to the recommendations of staff. We will encourage community involvement during design and approval, and we're hoping afterwards as well, and we look forward to creating a facility that the community can be proud of. With that, I do have a short video. I know there was some of you at the at our first meeting with the town council, but for those that weren't there, I thought I would just.
We're here today at the shelter to save some wonderful dogs whose time is up. If we don't take them today, they'll die at 4 o'clock p.m. That's why what we do is so important. This is Betsy. Betsy was one of the 31 dogs that Lori and I took in finding babies euthanized the entire shelter, all 350 dogs due to infectious disease. You're only given 3 days as an owner surrender. You're only given 5 days as a stray. After that, their time's up. They're euthanized. Their life is no longer. Betsy was scheduled to be euthanized that day, and we could have barely thought,
And with that, that concludes our presentation. As you can see, we have, I think, more than enough people here that can help you answer any specific questions in regards to Big Dog Ranch, and we'd be happy to answer any questions on the zoning and code side of things. Thank you.
Well, before we bring it back to the board, I'd like to hear the public comments and we can then have our discussion. Kevin? You stand where you are, fine.
Sure. I haven't spoken in front of a group before, I guess so. That being said,
Pretty small group.
pretty small group, pretty comfortable. I've known Big Dog Ranch for 6 years now. They're a spectacular organization. I suggest you go visit them and see how many lives they save, how many people really they make a difference for. And then I don't think we would be meeting about this. I think that Loxahatchee Grove certainly has a place for them, wherever you determine that to be. I live in Loxahatchee Groves. This is the kind of organization we should support.
Yeah, just for the record, give us your name and your address.
My name is Kevin Swerdlin. I live on Raymond Drive. Thank you.
All right, Teresa? Name and address.
Teresa Dodson, 104 Barcelona Drive, Royal Palm Beach. Big Dog Ranch are moving out to the rural community of Loxahatchee. I think would be huge for our area. Educating people and children to value their pets, you know. They're not disposable. Teaching children to save dogs, you know.
Thank you. Meg?
I'm Meg Weinberger. I live in Coosa and Palm Beach Gardens. I'm the vice president of Big Dog Ranch. I'm also the mother of 2 little girls, soon to be a little boy that actually met at Big Dog Ranch and we're adopting them. I'm so proud to be a part of Big Dog Ranch. It just makes such a difference in so many lives. And to see my kids and what we're teaching them to make the world a better place through them, it's amazing. It's just every day there's a new story and a new life that's touched. And I would be thrilled to have it as my neighbor because, you know, there used to be a time when I was hiding a pair of shoes in my trunk, and now I'm hiding a vet bill because I saved the dog that I didn't want to tell my husband about. But, you know.
You know this is a public record.
Trust me, it's all out there now. He checks the trunk. But, you know, I like nice things, and I'm excited to be a part of Big Dog Ranch and to go and take this model and teach other facilities to be as good as us and go out in the community, not just taking a dog and putting it in a home, but taking a dog and socializing it and getting it ready for a home so it's not coming back to a shelter, and teaching people how to properly care for their dog. And I just have to say I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this. Thank you guys for hearing that.
Thank you. Peter?
Good evening, over here.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's all right. Peter Robbins, I live at 70 Via Verona in Palm Beach Gardens. Thank you for the time tonight. My wife is a board member at Big Dog Ranch, and as everybody knows, when your wife decides to get involved in an organization, that pretty much means you're going to get involved in the organization. But I'm happy to do so. I volunteer with Big Dog Ranch. I try to do whatever I can to help the cause. It's a great facility. I think you'd be proud to have it here. And I think what's important to me is if I look at it from the other side, I see that they've worked with staff. Everybody's got a good comfort level and has addressed some concerns and has got some protections in place. So it seems to me like it's a good fit and it's commendable that staff has worked with Big Dog Ranch to come to an agreement. So I just encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
Hi. Excuse me for looking like this. I just came from the ranch. I've been out there all afternoon. And I'm a volunteer at the ranch. I volunteered for the last couple of years with them. And basically, I spend almost every minute I'm not working at the ranch just because it's the most rewarding thing you could possibly do. Seeing these animals come in that have been abused on the edge of death. You know, they wouldn't be with us today if it wasn't for Lori, Meg, and everybody here, and the incredible work that everybody does. I don't live in Loxahatchee Groves, but I live in Loxahatchee, 67th Court, and I would love to have an organization like this anywhere near me, and I really appreciate the fact that you guys are working with us so much, because I think it would be a wonderful addition to Loxahatchee Groves.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, thank you. And Deborah?
I'm Debbie. I'm fortunate enough to be a part of Big Dog Ranch. I'm employed by them, I work in the adoptions office, and I have to tell you, it's one of those jobs you can't turn off. It just gets into your heart, it gets into your soul. You see the faces of the dogs when they come in, the look of shock and, oh my goodness, why am I here? Why did my people bring me here? Why was I in that kill shelter? And it just keeps you coming back. And we not only find them homes, we find them good homes. We do home visits. We do not just adopt the dog out to any home. We make sure we talk to them about what their work schedule is, how many dogs are in the house, what's their activity level. We try to pair the right dog in the right home, and we have a trainer on staff to try to make adoptions more successful. My husband yells at me every night, turn the computer off, because Lori Simmons and Meg, they get 1,000 emails every night with these faces and the time frames. I've worked in finance, I have a finance degree, I've ran a barn for the past 10 years. Nothing is more rewarding than this. So thank you for giving us an opportunity.
Yeah. Michael?
Just sort of like Peter said, when your wife's involved,
You're involved.
so I just want to say I've been supportive of Big Dog Ranch and moving to Waxahachie first.
And where's the one that I was supposed to read? I seem to have misplaced it.
Here it is.
Oh, there it is, behind my computer. Okay, this one will be read into the record. This is from Kelly and Amber Nelson, that live on Hammondville Road. I guess it's up in the acreage. We support Big Dog Ranch Rescue with their new location. My 12-year-old daughter, Amber Nelson, has helped raise money through fundraisers. She raised over $3 grand. That's pretty good. Okay, so that was read into the record for. Okay, bring it back to the board and open it up for discussion. You look like you've got a question on your mind. Grace?
I rescued a dog from Palm Beach County Shelter. I love animals. Tried to go through life without a dog after my baby passed and couldn't do it. So we rescued a dog from Palm Beach County Animal Shelter. And by trade, I'm a planner. That's what I do. Jim does. Economic development is what I do. So my heart is with all of you. My mind is with the application. And the application is for a text amendment to our code. Has nothing to do with the use that you guys are talking about because of the way the application was submitted. Now, the application is not tied to Big Dog Ranch, even though it sounds like what you guys do is amazing. That's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is an amendment to words. We have a law that's in place, and we're asking to change the law to allow for certain things. So I have a couple questions for Jim, our planner. When you did the analysis of the text amendment, was it to the original request, which was to just allow the uses as outright accessory uses, or was it to the amended language? So when you're saying it's consistent with the comp plan policies, which are you speaking to?
It was related to the initial application.
Okay. The other question I have is the primary use of a animal rescue shelter is a special exception currently.
Yes.
Okay. And it's allowed in AR, which is a residential zone by nature. I mean, that's our residential zone.
Yeah, agricultural residential district.
Okay. Are there additional standards that have to be met as part of that special exception? Like distance requirements or square footages or things like that?
Well, we have the floor area ratio.
Okay.
That's associated with the district, and each district has its own property development regulations. setbacks, height limitations.
So there's nothing connected to the use itself, similar to what you're doing here, you're creating these additional requirements.
Yeah.
Are there any currently in place for?
For the rescue animal,
Yeah.
no.
Okay. I just have some concerns bringing a text amendment to our laws without having something we can attach it to. Because while these folks and what they're doing sounds phenomenal, that doesn't mean that someone can't come in once this code is changed and it's not them. And now we've opened up the door for a veterinary clinic and dog boarding associated with a shelter that may not be. And they're out there, and you guys probably know this better than we do. There are shelters out there that go underneath the guise of, we're here to rescue the animals, and the animals are in worse shape in the shelter than they would be out on the street. So while I appreciate you working with them to do this, I would feel more comfortable if it was a part of an application, if we knew where they were going and that we were actually making this amendment associated with a specific use. Right now, this opens up the door to anyone who wants to come in. I don't think they're banging down the door to come in, but this is, my planning mind thinking. The other concerns that I have is the fact that we don't know where a site would go. So I live on 147th Avenue North, which is 12 quarter-acre lots. Behind my house is a 5-acre lot. So a facility like this could go behind my house, which has a completely different impact on me and my neighbors than if I lived on a 10-acre lot next door to a 5-acre lot. The impact is different. So without knowing where this could happen, I have a concern with that. And I think the number one concern that I have, and we've talked about this over the last several meetings that we've had here and that we've had in the town council, we're very concerned about commercial development within the town of Loxahatchee Groves, and we want to push it towards Southern Boulevard. That seems to be the consensus. But when we talked about the, I forget the term that we used, the residential establishments, no, what was it, residential enterprise, which are commercial uses that we're allowing within our residential neighborhood, that's what is happening here, in my opinion, because we're opening it up to all of the ag res within our entire community. Now, the county and many municipalities in the area require it to, this type of use to be in an industrial, or in some cases, a little less lenient, a general commercial zoning designation. And there's reasons for that, because there are impacts, not just noise and smell, but there's traffic impacts as well. So I think the use of veterinary and boarding as associated with a shelter is consistent. It goes together. The three things go together and they work together very well. But I'm concerned with allowing it in the ag, in the residential section. If it were in, where we said ag residential, but it had to be, on Southern, or that it had to be in a specific location, that would be one thing. But I just don't think allowing this within the ag residential zoning district is consistent with the code, because it wouldn't be compatible with the residential uses adjacent to it. I don't think that we can help every single use that we want in our community through changing our text, through changing our code. I don't think that's what our jobs are, and I've noticed there's been a consistency to that lately. There's a problem in the community, someone is doing something that, because we incorporated and we created these laws, that now they can't do. So as a community, we're trying to come together and piecemeal and fix things, and that concerns me because of the unintended consequences that could happen. So while I support a text amendment that would allow veterinary and boarding as an accessory use to a shelter I would not support it being anywhere within the ag residential. I think this needs to be defined a little bit more. I think if the applicant who's doing the text amendment had a site that they identified, it would make it easier, because right now we're just opening it up for everywhere. And I don't think it's fair to the community because we don't know where ultimately it's going to land. So, but again, I love dogs. I think what you're doing is great, but what we're talking about has nothing to do with what you're doing. This has to do with our laws and regulations within our community and what we want to become. Thank you.
Can I respond to that? Okay, first of all, rescued animal care itself as a use is currently allowed in the agricultural residential district, subject to special exception. The reason why it's subject to a special exception is because the town understands that it may not necessarily be appropriate on every parcel in town. Therefore, it has to go through the special exception process, which has a whole litany of criteria that it has to meet in order for the town to grant the special exception.
But that's what I asked you originally, and you said that it had to do with.
Well, no, I'm not. Rescue animal care itself doesn't have any specific criteria, but every special exception is reviewed in relation to a whole list of criteria, most of which are related to compatibility.
Jim, if I may, I think what you're asking about is under section 170.225, special exception has review standards that basically has 10 items that are like considered findings that you would look at, standards to review any special exception.
Okay. But there weren't any that were specifically connected to shelters.
Yeah,
No.
Okay.
yeah, that's right, and that's why I added the extra criteria
I understand.
in the staff recommendation. And if you look at page 19 of 21 in the staff report there, the AR district, agricultural residential, yes, that's our residential district. It encompasses almost the entire town. If you look at all of the allowed principal uses, most of which are permitted by right and don't require special exception review, there's an awful lot of non-residential uses in that list. So the agricultural residential district is really almost a catch-all district in town where there's a whole list of uses in addition to residential units that are currently allowed. Rescue animal care is one of them. So what we're proposing is that rescue animal care be subject to not only special exception review, but also the conditions in Chapter 80 that we have added, with the idea in mind that the special exception process itself and the conditions that we're adding will ensure that an appropriate location is identified and approved.
And if I could add to Member Joyce, I think just to supplement what Jim was saying, I think if you have the veterinary component and the stable and the boarding component as permitted uses or special exceptions in their own right or as permitted uses and accessory uses, I think then you could really be concerned because now you really are opening it up. But by virtue of the safeguards that Jim has implemented, what we're saying is those accessories are to that special exception, and now that entire package, if you will, must be reviewed. And yes, I mean, it obviously, wherever the location is going to be important because there may be factors specifically inherent to that location that obviously in a review you'll be looking at closely. But basically, you know this when you put a use in either as a permitted use or a special exception in a zoning category, you are in effect saying that it's appropriate, it should be considered appropriate anywhere in that category, provided of course it meets all the criteria.
Right, and I understand that, I get that. I just think by changing what it is, because we're changing it, we're now, it's now becomes a commercial business because It's open to the public. You're now offering veterinarian services and boarding services, which has an increase in traffic and an increase in the number of people who are out and about. And maybe I need to separate it out then so that I'm not misunderstood. If it were all tied together in the fashion that you're suggesting, I do not think that that package is appropriate in an AR, 5 zoning district. If you want to keep it the way that it is now and someone wants to do a rescue shelter, that's already in the code and it is a special exception. But you're asking us to review a change to that. And that's what I'm commenting on, the change to that. I understand that it's already allowed as a special exception. I understand that. And that is what it is. We're not even really talking about that. We're talking about the amendment, the change to what the text is. And I have concerns about that. So.
I understand.
Somebody else help me out here. I don't want to.
Morris?
I need time to calm down. Someone else.
Okay. Keith, I'm gonna start there.
Jim, could you help me with ULDC definition of commercial kennel and dog board, the difference?
I don't have
The ULDC definitions for commercial kennels versus dog care or dog rescue facility.
I've got the definition here, if you'd like it. Commercial kennel, a commercial establishment including any building or land used for the raising, boarding, breeding, sale, or grooming of domesticated animals, e.g. dogs, cats, not necessarily owned by the occupants of the premises for profit. That's right out of our.
For a dog rescue facility, does it have a formal definition?
Well, we're proposing that the definition be added in that.
But there's no pre-existing.
No, there's nothing in there now. That's why I put that in there.
Can either of those two items be considered agricultural in nature? With you working with the domestic animals, can that be classified as an agricultural activity or an agricultural use?
Well, I suppose, if we're talking about dogs and cats, probably not.
Although I don't know, there might be some gray area if you're talking about breeding. I wouldn't necessarily rule out breeding, it might not. I don't know for sure, but research.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the veterinarian services and dog boarding is to be considered collectively or individually?
That just gives them an option. That gives them an option if they want to include either or both.
So there could be a decision made on one and not the other, or one pro, one negative, or both positive,
or they come in without either.
Okay. And currently, both veterinarian services and dog boarding, to confirm your previous statement, would be a special exception use review.
The rescued animal care is a special exception. The veterinary and dog boarding aspect of it is not covered.
Okay, so that's new territory to go on to.
Yes.
I will tell you that many people have indicated that that is a flaw in our code, that vets should be allowed in the AR based upon our equestrian community.
We have
That's a question I'm sure we'll wrestle with in the near future,
Okay.
as it relates specifically to that use.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments, gentlemen.
I got lost on, maybe if you could go back over But are you saying that this change would start out in section 80 and you were gonna move it eventually?
Well, no, I was just talking about, usually, in section 80, that's where you set conditions for specific uses. You don't usually have the definition of that use in the section that you're setting the conditions. If, very likely, the final version of the code, we would take the first paragraph at the top of page 20 and put that into the definitions section of the code. And then section 80 would actually start where the word permits is. That's the appropriate way it should be done. I just want to have it all in one package here. That's all.
This is the first case that I've witnessed on this committee that's really been worthy of what the people of Loxahatchee Grove wanted, I think, when they incorporated. You know, the rest has been pandering to overdevelopment, God knows what else, dealing with ULDCs. Dragged in, and now the technocrats have to deal with it. I don't pretend to not know what exists in Loxahatchee Groves. There are plenty of dog outfits, there are plenty of veterinarians, birds, you name it. And that's what this place seems to be about. People came here to do really what they wanted and be involved in these sort of agricultural, natural type pursuits. Because we dragged in ULDCs from the county and played around with them, now the technocrats have to dance around to see how things work. I mean, one of the problems when you go with a 100-foot setback, I mean, in ULDCs you have 50 and 100-foot setbacks. And they're not only the 16 to 19 roughly of these pre-1972 PUDs out there, you know, where things are even smaller than 5 acres in groupings. You can see them when you look on a map. But there are people who move into this town, know full well what's happening next to them, buy anyway, and then come down and start complaining. So I really don't know what the difference would be waiting to knowing exactly what the site is, or jumping in and fiddling with the ULDC committee. We have a separate committee now doing nothing but fiddling with only the ULDCs that our council would wish them to fiddle with. So I think you add a 100-foot setback. I mean, I had a surveyor draw the setbacks on a 5 acre and a 10 acre plot, and you lose like 33% of your land. With a 100-foot setback, I really don't know how you're going to operate runs. And I've been to the facility. The place looks like a dog facility after a natural disaster, like after a hurricane struck. You have, I mean, they're dogs stacked to the rafters. I mean, jammed, the place is jammed. So it would seem to me that if they were to operate, they would need everything possible. I mean, just on the face of it. So
The only setback that I had in section 80 is
The dog
is for the dog run.
right.
Yes.
And that's where people, I remember we entered this territory before, where there were neighbors complaining about, I don't know whether they were horses too close, or goats, or, I mean, you can refresh our memory as to what the specific, but birds. And I think we finally realized that we had bona fide ag, and this and that, and some of that should be allowed. So that's really the general.
Well, you can certainly make a recommendation that's different than the staff recommendation if you think the setback should be 10 feet. Recommend that.
I don't know if 10 feet, I mean,
I was being facetious.
yeah. I don't know if dogs can be, I don't know if dogs can be bona fide ag, I don't know if they can get. And yeah, you can't really give them a position that's indefensible, because they'll go after
Well,
you. You have to do mass, by,
yeah, well, right now, the facility has to go through this drug acceptance process, and Big Dog has no problem with that. They aren't saying that they're an ag use and they're, and we
Right,
can't
I
apply our
understand that.
regulations.
Yeah, I understand.
Mr. Chair, at some point in the deliberation, you've been asked, there's a couple people that still wanted to talk, and I don't know if they didn't get the sheet or not. And also the applicants also want to make some summary comments, and I indicated that you'll probably give them that opportunity when it's appropriate.
Yeah, well, in the future, we'll hold public comment, and then public comment's going to be over. But since somebody, I guess, got here late, we'll certainly listen to that. Lawrence, for you?
Yeah, I'm not so sure they drew out 100-foot setbacks on a potential 5-acre property and saw what the impact would be.
Yeah, it was after Robert.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty.
I guess this is Emily.
Yes.
Is there anyone else that didn't get a chance to say anything?
Well, I'm with the applicant. I don't know if I need to fill one out or not.
Yeah, why don't you, if you're.
Sure.
I apologize, I did submit a card for public comment, and I normally wouldn't try to speak out of turn like this, so I don't know if I got misplaced or what happened, but I did just very quickly want to address the board, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen.
Sure.
Thank you for having us here, and I've heard some of your comments, and, you know, I know that you understand it's pulling at your heartstrings, but I kind of wanted to talk to you from the other aspect. I'm a spokesperson for FPL. Prior to that, I worked for CBS 12 News. And
My favorite anchors.
thank you very much. I hope that sways your decision a little bit. I serve on lots of boards in the community. March of Dimes, I'm the chairperson for the Marketing Communications Committee there. I serve on the Boys and Girls Club, and I do lots of things in the community. And what I'm proudest of is my service for Big Dog Ranch Rescue. And I get emotional when I talk about it, because they changed my life. And more than me and me personally, they've changed the community. They have changed the landscape of Wellington and the people in Wellington. Because I was in media, I know a lot about good press, and this is an organization that could bring you national attention to Loxahatchee. And that's the kind of thing you can't pay for good press. Bringing something like that in can make you look good.
Sorry, we have Sunsport Gardens, and we made it on the evening news in Germany.
I know that, so you could use some good press, I'll tell you what, and then we could provide it for you. This is an organization that really has made a difference. Really, as I said, it's changed the landscape of Wellington and can do the same for you. And to your point, it's about educating people in Loxahatchee. What we did in Wellington was teach people about how to be good dog owners, what you need to do, how not to get overcrowded. We can do the same for your community, and I think we can really help out, and I just really appreciate you letting me speak out of turn. And I hope that, you know, laws, I understand it's hard to amend them, but this is a cause that, in my humble opinion, I feel like you need to look at it with a fine-tooth comb and see if there's any way you can make this happen, because I'm telling you, the company I work for, FPL, which has hundreds of thousands of employees, recently chose Big Dog Ranch to do a nonprofit energy makeover. We choose only 4 a quarter, and it got, talk about national recognition within Florida. The story that we did got picked up hundreds of times, and it went national as well. So this is an organization that, having the name Loxahatchee underneath it, would certainly behoove you, and I appreciate your time, so thank you. Loxahatchee Roads, I apologize. Thank you very much.
Let's hear from you last. Brian?
My name is Brian Tuttle. I am basically the developer who's helping Big Dog move. And we understand all your concerns, and what we have is a chicken and egg issue. Do we go out and we spend $50,000, $100,000, finding a site, drawing up a site plan, doing all that stuff, and then bring it here, and then find out that we can't get the text amendment, and given it's a nonprofit, it could almost bankrupt the organization? Or do we come in and find a text amendment that's under a special exception, and then once we know that if we can meet certain site plan requirements, then we have a deal, and then we go spend the $50,000. So we have a chicken or the egg situation, and after meeting with the city manager and talking to everyone kind of felt the text amendment was the best way to go on that. I think there's some misunderstandings, and I just want to clarify. This is going to be a big site. It's going to be like 20 acres, 15, 20 acres, maybe bigger. And that's one of the reasons that we've said that the 100-foot setbacks, we can live with that. I mean, if it was going to be 5 acres, then you're right, we would have a problem. But given it's going to be a big site, and it's going to be on a major road, it's either going to be on Folsom or Okeechobee, or it's going to be very, very close. And you guys are going to be able to come in and tear that site plan apart. You're going to be able to look at it. You're going to be able to make changes. You're going to be able to move it around. You're going to be able to say you don't like that site plan. And we're going to be able to move it. But we can't get started until we have a text amendment that says, go start. If you don't put this type of thing in Loxahatchee Groves in Palm Beach County, where do you put it? I mean, where do you put it? Where do we go? Where everybody says, I want to help dogs. But if nobody will let them help dogs, how do you do it? So we need some leadership from people to say, we want to do it. Now, talking about the boarding, as you know, this is allowed as long as we don't do any commercial boarding and we don't do any commercial vet services. It's an allowed exception. What is the boarding for? Let me give you an example. You adopt Big Dog. What's that big dog? Do you have the really big one?
Which one? Bruiser, Chili?
No, the
Peyton, Isis.
the breed.
Great Dane.
Great Dane. They adopt out Great Danes that nobody else will adopt out. You have a Great Dane, you have a sickness in your family, right? You got to fly up north. Nobody's going to board that dog. But because you adopted it from Big Dog, you can now go back there and say, hey, will you watch my dog for 3 days while I go visit a dead relative or go to a funeral or whatever? And no one else can do that. So that's what the commercial boarding is for people that have already adopted a dog that need to bring it back for a few days so they can go take care of personal business. Same difference. Lori can tell you a story. They had a Great Dane that ate a corn cob. To fix that it's gonna cost like $2,000-3,000 from a normal vet. Those people didn't have the money to do it. So what they did was they brought it back to the Big Dog Rescue to have the surgery. But because they can't do commercial services, they had to unadopt the dog, give it back to the shelter do the work for a nominal amount, and then give it back to the people. So we're trying to get all this out in the light and make it right and make it open to everything we need. One other point to your point about shady rescues. Big Dog's inspected by Palm Beach County. How often? Once a month. They did their inspection yesterday, found 0 violations. It adopts out 2,000 dogs a year.
Statewide, not all through that.
But that's a phenomenal treat. So all we're saying is we need your support, we need some leadership. We're going to be back with a site plan when we find one. But I can't go spend the money, they can't go spend the money. We can't do that until we say, yes, we think we can live with this, here's a text amendment, go find a site. Okay? Thanks a lot.
I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any other public comments? Because once it's over, it's over. There's no debate. You've already said it.
I'm the applicant, so I'll talk. As far as the bottom went off, we agree. It's not what we want to look like, it's not what we want to be. We haven't spent the money to rebuild the buildings because we didn't realize when we first moved there, we weren't going to be able to use the whole 28 acres. We're stuck with that accessory use to really 4 acres. We have 7, but 2 of it are under high tension power lines. And 2 of it are lakes, are ponds. So we really have 4 usable acres on the entire property to use. So everything's condensed. The wildlife buildings, we haven't rebuilt them because we knew we didn't want to stay. Once we weren't going to be able to use the whole 28. So we've been looking at sites throughout Palm Beach County for over a year. We've decided where we want to be is Loxahatchee Groves. So I hope you want us as much as we want you.
If I had 5 of your neighbors in this room, what would they tell me? They're along Acme.
I only have one, we've only had one complaint from one neighbor in the entire 2 years we've been there. And she complained before we came, and she complained about everything else. And I can tell you that neighbor has her piles of trash that we have to send our staff to go pick up out on the road that you can't get down the road. Her garbage is everywhere. Her property is the most ill-kept on the street. And her dogs, she breeds dogs, and her dogs are always wandering the street, and we're always picking them up and returning them to her home. So
Sounds
that's,
like one of my neighbors here.
but, yeah, and, you know, the other factor is the street we're on. I mean, if you go to try to drive down it now, every time it rains, it floods. We're the only one that maintains the road. We spent $8,000 last year grading and fixing the road, and not one neighbor on the entire street helped or put in $1. So, you know, as far as being a good neighbor, the neighbor to the right, Hughes, loves us. The neighbor, SQ Polo, they love us. So there's really only 3, 4 neighbors. It's only the one, and she's one of those constant people that you can't please no matter what you do.
Wow.
So.
Imagine that. Okay. Liz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, does a special exception run with the land?
Yes.
I think there's another way to do this that will help you guys and at the same time be consistent with whatever term that Board Member Corning keeps referring to. What did you say, the technical, whatever it was? If a special exception runs with the land and someone finds a piece of property and this is already permitted, it's been my experience that as part of a special exception, you can allow for accessory uses that are not necessarily called out in the code as a accessory use to something else, because you're processing a special exception. So your special exception comes forward as the animal rescue, thank you. And as a part of the animal rescues, you're going to have veterinarian service because the animals come there and they need veterinarian care. You're going to be boarding the animals because that's what it is. Our code specifically prohibits commercial boarding, but if what they're doing, and again, this application is not about you, it's about the code amendment. So, and we have to be clear on that. We have to absolutely be clear on that. But if they came forward with an application for a special exception and said that they wanted to do boarding for animals that were previous residents, that's something that can be incorporated into the special exception, could it not?
Well, I think there's a question there. I mean, if it's termed in accessory use, it's not listed here. There's language in our code that makes it pretty clear in my mind that if you're asking for an accessory use that's not listed, you're not going to get it.
Are these all the accessory uses in our community?
That's the way that I read the code, yes. And there's language in there that says that if you're not specifically listed here, you can't do it.
Okay, so is there an administrative interpretation that can be made that says, as part of, animal rescue, these are just things that automatically go with it? I mean, there are certain things like a hospital. You have a hospital. There are 1 million accessory uses in a hospital, a pharmacy, a this, a that, the other thing. You're not going to have every single item listed that's part of the daily function of a hospital. in your code, you couldn't do it. So I'm just wondering if this is really even necessary, if those are standard practices as the daily operation of the business, and it obviously is. Now, if you're talking about opening it up to a public veterinarian and a public boarding, in which kennels are just not allowed, you cannot do commercial kennels, period, then that's a different thing. But if someone were, if that was something that they would agree to, is that something that could be processed through the special use?
Well, let me answer that.
Okay.
Because of the fact that it's very unclear, or you can read the code in a way that if it's not listed, you can't do it. That sets the stage for an unknown circumstance or a question. When somebody comes through with a use that's not listed in here, can I do it or can I not? The way I read the code, maybe I can. Staff might read that we're saying you can't because it's not listed. With this amendment, there's no doubt, it's clear.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm talking as it relates to a special use, because they do dog training, right? Okay. We don't have dog training listed here, so now you're going to have to add an accessory use for that as well.
I think that's in the definition that we have.
I understand, Jim. I'm looking for a way, and in my mind, it seems to me that if there is an administrative interpretation that is made, and it's a written interpretation that says, as it pertains to special exceptions, accessory uses as determined by the administrator as being consistent with the primary use is something that can be done as part of the special exception. I just think that, again, by changing our code, and it does open the door for others to come in, and I wasn't implying that you guys were not good. I was implying there are others out there who aren't, who could come in just like you can, because
We rescue them.
I believe that, and there's no distant separation between one or another, so you could, have, not that they would, but you could. These are, again, unintended consequences. I would think that's an avenue that, just as a whole, we should explore as a community.
Let me weigh in on that. I think, based upon the premise that you have, in general, accessory uses, whether they're accessory to a principal use or a special exception, are considered traditional, customary, incidental. Okay. So yeah, I don't think we would be trying to name everything we do if we're talking training or whatever, but I think the issue, as these folks brought it to us, as it relates to the premise behind their proposal, is that, yeah, you probably do have some vet services in any animal rescue care, but they're taking it a step further because they offer this service for all the dogs that they eventually rescue and then send back out, that if somebody has to come in, like the corn cob example, they can do it. So they're providing a greater level of vet service than maybe the typical animal rescue care. And the same thing with the boarding. I think one of the examples I've heard you guys say is when some folks have to go back into service and do a tour of duty and they don't have anybody to take care of their dog, they'll take it back. So I guess they offer an advanced, if you will, or an enhanced level of service that certain animal carriers don't rescue. So I think when you start to look at those accessory uses as it relates to this special exception, it's a quasi-judicial use, you have the general criteria, you always have the ability, as you're doing your own deliberation, to add some conditions that are warranted, and obviously if they agree, fine, everybody's happy. So I think there's a ton of safeguards that you can use. And I think they're trying to meet you halfway, or at least I should say the town, by virtue of what we've done, everybody's trying to meet everybody halfway to make sure those safeguards are there, that if you were concerned about an aspect of the operation, that's being removed. I don't know if that gives you the comfort you're looking for.
So the answer is no to my question.
Chris,
Okay.
I think the answer to your question is that, as Mr. Corning said, we have a ULDC review committee that's in process now. I think what you're saying is an appropriate subject for them to take up. Where we can put something in the code that says, okay, staff or the town manager has the ability to make the decision as to what is or is not an accessory use.
Only as it pertains to special exceptions, because you
Yeah.
do have all of those additional.
Yeah, but that's not in there now.
Okay.
So that's the part, the potential unintended consequence, if you will, that we have with that.
Okay. I was just trying.
Okay, Jim, let me ask you my questions. Just to preface, I think my wife and I, since we've lived here in Los Angeles Groves, have rescued over 50 animals, dogs. They're all stray. We didn't, a few of them we went and picked up at the pound because we had an empty bowl that wasn't getting filled up every night. So, and we've had to put 4 down this year so far. It's only May. So anyway, I understand what you're doing, and I support it 100%. Now, the thing is just as Ray said, is that we have scoundrels here who move into our community and say that they're going to be a nursery. And they have a little bit of spot on their land where it's a nursery, and then the rest of it is a landscape operation. And so, because it's an accessory use to a nursery. And so then we have other people who are, have a little bit of nursery, and the rest of their property is, you may have seen it on the corner of Okeechobee and F Road, is a big mulching operation. It's something that belongs in an industrial center, not in the heart of our town, but it's there. So that's what we're afraid of, because, somebody comes in and says, this is what we want to do, and we all know what they want to do. They want to have a landscape operation, they want to have a mulching operation, but we just, it's not permitted. So they find a way around it and we do it anyway. We have on the corner of F Road and North Road, a major horse rescue operation that was in Wellington. I don't know what it's called, but it's the Premier Horses. What is it? Sure Thoughts. Yeah, I'm not sure they went through any rescue thing, but, or any exception thing, but they're there. They just brought in a whole passel of little ponies. And my wife wants to go over and play with them. I said, what are you gonna do, dress them up like kids? Anyway, don't get me started on that. So my question is then, Jim, is could in your proposal here for your conditions is have in there that all veterinary services are provided for existing clients. In other words, write it such that somebody down the street's not going to bring in their dog and get their toenails clipped.
We could certainly write that in there.
And the same thing with any boarding. Is any boarding of dogs will only be for clients and former clients. However, it would have to be written. So therefore, it's very specific. Is when somebody from Wellington or Royal Palm Beach wants to go out of town for a month on a cruise, they can't bring their dog there and dump it off. If they bought their dog there, if their dog came from there, fine. But I think we need to try to put a cap on it as much as possible, since this just doesn't apply to big dogs. This applies to anybody who wants to come in and open up a dog rescue operation.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if that's the desire of the board, you can certainly make that part of your recommendation.
That's what I do. I don't know whether I do this in motion or not. The other thing is I would take it out to 10 acres, minimum of 10 acres, because then we get that whole.
Well, it's 200 foot back over 10 acres, it's 5 acres, 200 foot setback.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna make it harder to find a 10 acre site. I mean, it could have a small facility, I mean, nobody, who knows how big.
Somebody rescuing a teacup Yorkies. That's little dog rescue.
We have those too. If someone were going to do a facility like this, hypothetically, if someone were, what would be a proper acreage? I mean, if you had your dream facility, what would be the proper acreage?
100 acres.
Well, if you had your dream
Then you
facility
have
that you had the money to
What's
buy.
Somewhere between 10 and 20 acres.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the day property?
Actually, it would be a
We
perfect
are
location.
talking to him.
But we can't finish any negotiations till we finish this.
Yeah.
But yes, we're talking to
That would be a
everybody.
perfect location.
I can name 5 locations if you'd like to know, so.
Well, if it would be appropriate, turn the gavel over to Rob, I'll make a motion that we change the recommendation to whatever they're called, Jim, I'm sorry. To, that the veterinary services be provided for only in-house clients.
Can I make a comment?
When we're done, then you can, and it'll be up for discussion. And any boarding will be for former clients, boarded properly.
Vet and boarding for in-house or former.
You might say previously adopted out.
Previously
Adopted out.
Previously adopted out, minimum 10 acres. Do you want to call for a second and we can discuss?
Yeah. Is there anybody wants to make a second on this motion?
Apparently not, fails for lack of a second. All right, take them together then.
Can we discuss it?
Well, yeah, we can, and it can be voted down. So it also needs a second to discuss it, and then amendments can be made.
I'll make a second.
Okay, so
Dennis
we're,
makes a motion and keep second.
all right, so now it's open for discussion.
I turn the gavel back.
Yeah, you. All right, Grace is
No,
done.
you can go first.
Then maybe you can help me out on this, because maybe you can help us figure out what you're requesting as far as, previous customers and all. I could just bring a dog to a facility, donate it, and then you guys work on it, or can I do that? Let's say I've never been a customer, and I wanted to have you guys do veterinary services, or wait for me to bring the dog, say, hey, I'm giving it to you, then you do the work, and then I adopt it back.
If you surrendered, I need to correct your earlier
Please.
statement.
Please.
The dog that the people took to the emergency facility
Sure.
and said, we're not gonna spend $2,500 getting this form cap out of his stomach,
Right.
that's too much money. So you can put the dog down or call Big Dog Ranch Rescue. So we went and got the dog, and the dog was not adopted back out to those people.
Okay,
So-
that's, okay.
No, to answer your question,
But
no,
could somebody
because
else
you're
do
not
that?
a responsible pet owner
We would have,
in
we
our
would have to
eyes.
put that in code to keep somebody from doing that.
So, because we know who surrendered, when we take,
Right.
80% of our dogs come out of high kill shelters. The other 20% are surrendered to us from local people that, we're just getting 2 golden retrievers tomorrow. The lady passed away. Her daughter tried to keep the dogs, but her daughter is highly allergic and is in the hospital with hives. So, there's situations where those dogs are older. They're older golden retrievers, so they're gonna end up in Palm Beach County, and because they're 8 and 10 years old, they're going to be euthanized. So, we take the owner surrenders that need us, okay? We have another one, the guy accidentally let his dog get pregnant. The dog got pregnant by a bigger dog. It's a 15-pound dog. It's coming in tomorrow morning. He says, my vet's saying it needs a C-section. That's $2,000. I can't even pay my rent this month. So do we let the dog die? Or do we take the dog in? He's not getting the dog back. We'll take that dog, we'll do that C-section, we'll raise its puppies with the mother, we'll raise its puppies, we'll spay and neuter her, we'll get her healthy, and we'll get her in a great home, but it won't be back in his home, to answer your question.
So my issue is, how do we protect other operations from, taking a donation and donating it back? Because, that's the point, they're working in an ethical manner, so, maybe you need to have
We want to provide the services of affordable boarding and affordable vet care for the people that we have adopted our dogs out to. And they can come back to us for services that, you know, the guy that, we have 2 dogs right now where they're in a 6-month tour of service. So, we want to be able to afford that our dogs are our dogs forever. It's in their contract. If you have to give up your dog for any reason, health, divorce, home foreclosure, you cannot just give that dog away. The dog must come back to us. We've taken a stake in that dog's life, the rest of its life.
One other question, and maybe clarify it. I thought I heard something about, maybe kind of clear up, like you guys work on donations, but you're hoping to generate other funds?
We have a major donor in place that wants to build us a state-of-the-art facility. It will look like no other. It will look like a ranch with front porches. The buildings will look like homes.
But are you
And we
looking
want-
to, how else would you be generating any other?
For example, if you have a deaf in the family and you have a Great Dane, they could watch him over the weekend and they would generate revenue from that. So it would only be for previously adopted out dogs.
So, okay, so there's no new.
No, this is not to go out and advertise dog boarding it's for previously adopted out dogs only.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Corning. You done, Rob?
Well, just my statement is, we just need to cover that unscrupulous organizations could maybe tweak this, so we gotta look at the language to make sure that they're not able to adopt, unadopt, or whatever else.
Yeah, well, I think with every use that we have, and regardless of how many conditions that we attach, there's gonna be somebody that figures out how to do something that he's not supposed to. But
Sure.
With what they're saying, that 80% of the dogs come from other shelters, and the balance are from dog owners that can't afford to take care of them, or can't afford to get them medical care. Maybe they're going to have a space or two that might be available where some guy comes in and does what you do, but it certainly doesn't seem to me like that's going to be.
But I'm not
my
concerned
issue.
about them,
Yeah.
I'm talking about
The next guy.
any other organization. You know, how do we make sure they behave like this, or how do we encourage them, that's all, not big dog.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we can, off the top of my head, I can't necessarily think of one.
It's just my concern to go to
But
all
I'll try to come up with something before council.
It's like that little landscaping, little nursery for a big landscape.
Yeah, I understand.
I think when the applicant stated that they were going to 20 acres, that's sort of a game changer. And it hadn't been mentioned in the presentation. 2, I believe we adopted the ULDCs in 2006,
10.
2010.
Started in 6.
Started at 6. Well, prior to that, all manner of agricultural operations have been going on out here. I mean, this was a place where people went to do whatever it was they dreamt of, including lions and tigers. Now that we've decided, we incorporated to protect ourselves from the county, we dragged this trail endorsing ULDCs and started marking them up. Now we're in a position of trying to figure out how to spin a web where these guys are allowed and someone else doesn't come in and abuse our further complications.
Well, that's the way codes are.
I know.
Codes are always changed and tweaked.
And especially this traditional type of code is even tougher. So, it's really,
Now, you mentioned 20. Would you rather see us say 20 acres? As
well, I'd be happy with 5. Whatever. I mean, I mean, I came here willing to accept whoever was gonna be my neighbor doing whatever they wanted to do. And I don't care what they do, and I've lived next to, or had a place next to, it sounds like the Amazon rainforest. And then they left, and now it sounds like the dogs, hounded the Baskervilles. And it really, when you get the most impact is actually feeding time. That's when it goes from just a normal rainforest to like just cacophony. But that's what they chose, that's what they came here to do. And I think that's part of the amazing fabric of the place. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy all these eclectic people. That's what I like about it. And once you get to this, I mean, you get into it. We're creating such a difficult thing to manage in terms of all this coding and paperwork. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to, it's like a train wreck, and I'm not sure how to stop it without.
I think Lawrence is right in
Wish
that
I could, yes.
we want to capture everything. I think this would be an easier conversation for me anyway, if I knew where this was going. If this was going on Okeechobee Boulevard and it was a 20-acre or even 15-acre site, or on Southern Boulevard, and when you are looking to establish yourself as a veterinary clinic that provides affordable service to anyone, or if you're looking to establish a boarding location for anyone in order to keep the nonprofit going, because philanthropic folks aren't out there as much, and I don't think anyone in the town won that $600 million. So
Except for Hills.
That's where it was sold. That doesn't mean that's where they live. So I think the difficulty for me, and again, when you said, I happen to agree with the board members that it needs to be larger than 5 for sure. But I would feel more comfortable knowing where. I think by making it a larger site than just 5, we weed out the people who may be the ones who are not as caring, because it's about quality of life for everyone. The animals, the people who live around you. And we all have our level of tolerance of our neighbors, and some are higher than others. But as a community, we have to look out for everyone. And I think that, what you do would be a good part of this community, that this use, if managed correctly, would be a good part of the community because of who we are. But I think we need to just tweak this a little bit, Jim.
This occurred to me, but I forgot to mention it. When you mentioned locating next to Red Barn. I mean, if you did that, there would probably be a massive celebration, because you'd be knocking out another commercial operation. And if in this process of just tinkering with the ULDCs, which were permanent mechanics or something, if you're saying, well, now you can't. Yeah, if you can't do commercial veterinarian, then, and you end up next to Red Barn, you ought to come back, or we shouldn't have done it in the first place. I mean, you should have commercial, and we have commercial veterinarians scattered through the internal.
That's why generally,
as well as other dogs, you already have where they're there.
Second Amendment goes
We
along
know
with
it.
the site.
They should say, we know it.
I'm sure we can live with a minimum size, and I think a compromise would be 11 acres. That way we're over 10 acre site, and that's gonna, put us, I think, with those setbacks in a very comfortable position for you guys.
And that's if you're allowed everywhere, right? That's the district-wide versus spot zoning?
They would be allowed everywhere in the district, but if you folks attach a minimum size requirement that's different than the minimum size for all properties, then they have to abide by that minimum size requirement. Whether that's 10 acres or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know what
The animal rescue facility is a perfect candidate for the special exception use review process, as it allows town council to establish the use of the property, the adjoining uses of the property, in addition to either approving the application or denying the application. The town council, by verbiage in that section, will allow the town council to pass it with conditions more restrictive than code. So we have the opportunity to have this reviewed, provided that there is a property that has been chosen to be the site. In another related matter, down in Monroe County, we've had the opportunity back in the 80s and 90s dealing with DCA involvement with County Monroe, deeming it an area of special concern, and made all types of moratoriums and restrictions and counts to become available for a building permit. That it was established where a person could simply put a contract on a piece of property contingent on the outcome of the special exception use review. And that might be a consideration. That way, a piece of property can be designated as the likely home site, and then we can do the proper review process through the special exception use review. I would like to restrict it to a property more than 10 acres.
Is that an amendment to this motion on the floor?
Those were comments.
You want me to make a motion, amend your
Please.
motion? Okay.
Can you make something that provides some sort of wider flexibility for an opening play, and then would allow them to be able to operate immediately, and then make a change such as if it were on Okeechobee to allow for commercial vet, which would make sense.
So I think you
So
do have
that
a
they're-
problem. I see where you're going. I
So
think
they
you-
have the freedom to I mean, this thing, I thought I'd be in and out of here in 10 minutes, because I thought this thing was the closest match to what this place really is about, of anything I've ever heard in front of this committee. But then, then I realized, oh boy, here we are with the ULDCs, oh yeah. And now we get into this thing where we're gonna make a nice little box for these guys. Then the next people coming in with somebody said, well, we have to make a nice little box for them. I mean, it just seems nuts to me, but.
I don't think, though, you could be in a position where you could have them go for a special exception use, and in the code, it doesn't have codified what they're looking to do. You're kind of putting it back to Brian's example of chicken and egg. Now you're asking them to go back and do the site first before having the language codified. So even if, I'm not so sure you can do that legally, is move forward with an application if you don't have the regulations on the books.
Well, there are a lot of 10s available, but when you get up past, if you say 11, well, now you cut out a huge chunk. Then there's some 15s, and now 20s, and then.
But you can say more than 10.
Yeah,
Oh,
then
you put a
it
side
cuts
description
down,
on it,
it
yeah,
cuts down.
But it could be 10.1.
Yeah, I know, but it
That's
still
why
cuts
11.
down the
I like
availability.
11.
I mean, if it's crafted for a specific one person to make up five targets in sight, all of them are over 11, well, that's wonderful, but you're then crafting something for a specific.
Go ahead, Grace, I think,
Okay.
yeah, you have an amendment to the motion.
Can I, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, I just want to point out that accessory uses are veterinarian services and dog boarding, which would be offered to the public.
No, that's not the amendment.
No, that's what it says.
No, no,
I'm letting you
but-
know that that's what it says.
But my motion was veterinary services and dog boarding to,
Previously adopted out dogs.
Current and previously.
Currently, previously not in the dust off.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not-
yeah, it says public.
it's not open.
But let's say hypothetically speaking, it was a location that was, let's say, the Day property or some other property on Okeechobee Boulevard. I think that it's a service that can be offered to the community. And I think maybe if I understood what Lawrence was saying, is there a way to say if you're located on a major thoroughfare that these types of services could be open to the public, but if you're located on the interior, on an, like a collector road, that they would only be allowed in conjunction with previously adopted pets?
Well,
Is that sound like?
Well, how about if we put a period after offered, and then let that determination be made at the time of the special exception?
I would not feel comfortable with that. I think we need to spell it out. If that's, I think in my experience that that's something you can do. If you're on a major arterial road, this is what's allowed. But if you're on an interior road, and I don't know how our roads are defined in our comp plan, then you can do this, because it's an ideal use for some place along Okeechobee Boulevard where the community could come and get the services without having to leave. I don't know that someone would drive north or south off of Okeechobee Boulevard from outside the community to drop off their pet.
Well, if they got a commercial designation, they could do it.
I know, but we're working on, under the special exception here. Under the special exception, we have, we're saying that the minimum plot size, or the plot size shall be more than 10 acres. Because we don't want to rule anybody out if it's 11, then it's 10 and a half. And we could,
10 or more?
I hear what you're saying. You're looking to say that these accessory use components can only occur, number one, if you have a property that's greater than 10 acres, 11 acres, whatever you want to say. And this option that you were talking about sounds like, that's not really an accessory use, but sounds like another condition to the special exception. You're saying basically you're putting a locational standard in there based upon the roadway.
But I would like for that to be within the standards, because
Yeah, it would be a standard.
Okay, not as part of an application additional standard, as
But
part
it's
of.
not, what I'm saying is it's not another accessory use component, it's an actual standard that you're
Yes.
judging the special exception.
Correct.
We can say if it has frontage on a arterial or an urban collector, it can.
So
offer
that's
services
southern
to the public.
Okeechobee.
And that's it.
Okay, that's exactly, is that what you were thinking as well?
What about the north-south road that's a higher speed road that's?
Folsom?
Folsom.
No?
That's a county
I
collector.
gotta tell you, that won't fly.
Okay.
The neighborhood there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we sell that.
Why not
Okay.
is 15 available on that road, so.
Okay, so if we use that, then you're allowed to have it open
Right.
to the public.
Yeah.
And if you choose to, you don't have to, but if
Okay.
you wanted to, you could. But if it were on any other road frontage, then it would be confined to only previously adopted
Okay.
pets.
Okay.
This isn't about you, we're protecting you. Remember that? This is just anybody.
But this only has to do with rescue. Okay.
Correct,
Yeah, I know.
correct. Yes, this is just as it pertains to the special use. Okay.
Okay. So where we have, parens B, accessory uses.
Right.
And we're gonna reword that to say, essentially, if the property fronts on an arterial or an urban collector, it can offer vet services to the public. Otherwise, it's gotta be previously boarded.
And something that includes the full 600 feet going back? I mean, it's part of the commercial area, right?
Yeah.
Southern.
Just the front. As long as they have frontage on Southern, they can do it.
Yeah.
Well, the commercial also goes 600 feet back, the road's going into the back.
They still have to have frontage on Southern. Right.
Physical frontage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Building physical.
The property has to front on Southern or Okeechobee in order to offer services.
Right, so if this is your 600 feet back, you couldn't subdivide it and then put it here. This is Southern, it has to be anywhere within that box.
That's only under PUD, but, you know, and, okay, we've got 10 acres or above now. The 10 acres or above only applies if they're offering the accessory uses?
No, I
Or
think it
it's
should
got to
be.
be 10 acres or above?
It has to be over.
Period.
It has to be over, period. It has
Over
to
10,
be,
even if it
I
doesn't-
would like to have it read to 11 acres.
This is my amendment.
Okay.
You can change it if you like, but
Okay, so even if they are not
I think it has to
including
be,
the accessory
yeah.
uses, it's all rescue animal care?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second.
Keith, second. All right, now just voting on the amendment.
Jim, do you want to read it back for the record, just to clarify, so everybody's clear on what we're?
Move staff recommendation with the change that parens A minimum plot size requirement. We'll read, no animal care operation shall be permitted on properties, animal care operations shall be permitted on properties greater than 10 acres. Okay. And under B, accessory uses. Let's see. I guess we would, okay, after offered, may also be offered to the public, provided the property has frontage on an arterial or an urban collector roadway. Otherwise, these services are limited to
Previously and
previously boarded and
adopted.
previously adopted. I mean, I'll get the wording right from the tape, but that's the gist, I guess.
Grace?
I'm voting.
Oh. Okay, so we're voting on the amendment. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Now to vote on the primary motion.
Well, the primary motion would be just the staff recommendation.
Okay, all right, well, the,
And then the second motion was to amend it.
okay.
So we approve the application with the amendment.
Well, as I recall, the points that I made was the size of 10 acres, that it only be for,
Animals that were there, that were
yeah,
there.
that were
Yeah.
previously adopted or
Previously adopted.
currently
Yeah.
residents of. So that's in this current motion as well?
It is, except for if it's on
It's
a
on a
major,
major plan.
right, then it can be open to the public.
All right. Is there any other comments from the board on this? Are we more or less finished with this then, staff?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving ahead. I'd like to have some unfinished business from the.
Yes,
It was 5-0.
I don't want to vote now. I don't
No
think-
sleeping in the meetings.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
Thank
very
you.
much for your time, we really appreciate it.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing
I
you at our
miss you
grand opening
on TV.
in 3 years, or 2 years.
I do. Oh, I
Hey, Peter, how are you? It's so nice to see you. I asked Debbie about
Yeah. Oh. It's too bad. It was great to see you guys.
We got you right.
Thank you.
All right. I think that, our town manager had a couple of comments for us, and his comments, so.
Thank you.
Town manager comments.
I just wanted to address an issue that occurred at our meeting on April 11th. And first, let me start off by saying this board is very deliberative. Of all the boards I've ever been involved in, you do a good job. You get into the specifics. Any number of the cases that I've seen, you really get to the nitty-gritty, even like tonight's issue. However, there was an issue that occurred April 11th, and I certainly, because you guys do a good job, I want to make sure that we stay on the right track. And what I want to do is go over April 11th for a second. During the review of Waxahachie Grove's comments, Member Close, I'm going to read it. It's in your minutes you have tonight. Member Close made a motion to recommend to the town council that the project is deferred in order to work with the applicant on the site plan and to request that staff retain a traffic consultant to review the interior layout and surrounding issues and specifically advise regarding pickup trucks and traffic flow. Board Member Corning seconded the motion. The motion passed 3-2. Close, Corning, and Harris voting yes. Lippman, Crawford voting no. And then later, I came back on a request from Mr. Lalonick, who had asked the board, could he go ahead and himself get the expert consultant, and the board basically felt that they were not comfortable with that. Now, let me say, there are two things wrong with what happened. And I have talked to the town council, I talked to some individually, and I addressed them at the May 17th. The issue is that as an advisory board, we can go over all the criteria that in your ordinance, you basically can vote an item up, in other words, approval, you can vote it down, if you're denying it, you can vote it up with conditions, you can vote it, when you're voting it down, you could say with reasons why you didn't do it. You have all those options to you. But to go ahead and to start doing what, to me, looks like a very frivolous tabling or deferment is not a good thing to do. And at that meeting, you may remember I had indicated that, number one, we didn't even have the consultant or the expert that Member Close was talking about on board. We're moving on it. We've had it, we've actually, since your meeting of the 11th, we've actually had presentations under CCNA. These items were taken to the town council, in fact, on Tuesday, and they approved the selection committee's 3 choices. So we do have a traffic consultant on board that we're going to be negotiating with under competitive negotiations, that being Simmons and White. But yet, we probably won't have a signed contract and that be a done deal until the second meeting in June, which I think is the 18th. So you can see, the point I was making that night was you have sentenced the applicant to a very long tabling, which is probably not fair. Because you could have, again, either voted it up or down and said, you know, and if you didn't like the applicant's response to any condition you may have asked for, you can state that. The second thing you did was, in that motion, you pretty much told council they're going to hire a consultant. Not a good thing to do. I mean, you don't really, as an advisory board, you don't have the authority to tell council they have to spend money on an issue. So, all I'm suggesting to what I would like to see the board do is, at our next meeting in June, bring this back up for deliberation. You had, it was a PUD approval, as you remember. You had the other PUD that night who provided you with a lot less detail, and that flew right by. So there was even an inconsistency in the review.
Lesson learned.
I think they learned that now. But, you know, and I mean, you know, Member Close,
right?
The KISS principle.
if you remember that night, Member Close had a lot of concerns, rightly so, that's her prerogative. And that is the give and take you can have. Just a note on tablings or on deferrals. I mean, a deferral is legitimate when staff screws up, doesn't provide you the information you need, the applicant screws up or doesn't provide the information you need, the applicant requests the table because either they have a conflict or something's going on, or because in deliberations with you they say, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good, let's work on that. But if they deny that, if they tell you, no, we don't agree with you, P&Z board, then that's when it's back in your court, and you could say, okay, then we're going to either recommend the conditions or we're going to deny for these reasons. But to compel and command the action you don't have that. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I think that way, that'll keep the board out of any, it won't make you the issue in any land use.
Exactly right. We don't want to be the issue, we want to be the facilitator to get things
So just
moved.
some input. And hopefully we can, we'll schedule it for the next meeting. Obviously, it'll take, you folks to bring it back up and actually discuss it.
And I would like to ask staff if you've, this whole thing of the vehicle weight and the number of vehicles in 33407, the weight map, 33470.
Like, why would you want that?
Well, because then we know.
Not
I
for
mean,
West Palm.
It's something that, why do we have 100% of the parking places in this dually size?
I said that how long
And,
ago? I think the very first meeting that we talked about that. And Councilman
Yeah, we're all handicapped.
Gerald said, that's what we all drive out here.
No, let's not get this issue.
I was just saying.
Well, you know what, let me give you a hypothetical on that. That deliberation was good. If you had come up with maybe something like, well, what if, can you guys work out a plan where maybe X amount of spaces are dualies, X amount of spaces are regular, and X amount are compact? And if they said, yeah, great compromise, you put that in your recommendation and you pass it on.
Sure, they'd rather do less pavement.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I
we're
think,
supposed to be
Joe
sustainable.
had mentioned to me that they were gonna go out and count dualies at Publix.
And we have, just to give you an update, we've taken some of the recommendations that we were given at the last meeting, and we've gone and made some selective changes to the plan. We've provided a draft copy to Jim and to Mark to take a look at, and hopefully they've been favorable on those changes, or look favorably on those changes. They consist of a certain percentage of the parking spaces going to a larger, wider space, so that you have a separation, or you have some differentiation of larger spaces in certain areas, but not all, 100% of the parking in those larger sizes. We also looked at, somebody had made a comment about the open space area being in the middle of the parking area, where it may not be as usable. So we looked at moving that next to the lake, so that you now have open area right against a larger open facility. So we've done those changes, and hopefully they're going to be, looked at favorably on yourself. And I'd like to have an opportunity next month to bring them up and at least present them and get some kind of a favorable response.
I think I will try to make it a point is to remind us all why we're here, and it's to make a decision and keep this over to the council to get done. I think that sometimes we really do spend too much time discussing how many angels can dance on the head of a needle.
Isn't it one? Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, well, that explains that.
I have a question though about this, and I wondered about that, and I'm kind of glad I wasn't here that night. How does the pending lawsuit that's in place over the entire site, because the entire site is being challenged, affect what their request is?
I don't think it's a lawsuit.
Well, what it is the citizens filed a writ of mandamus to the court.
Right.
And our attorney had, I think it was last Tuesday, and he did file, his pleading in the matter. I think he did a great job with it.
Yeah, he did.
And, in essence, what he was basically saying is a writ of mandamus is almost like when you have to do something that's very ministerial, but the town clerk's interpretation and review was not ministerial, nor was the council's review of her interpretation ministerial. That was just one argument he made among several. So we're waiting to see what the judge is going to say. But I feel pretty confident based upon what he filed that we're going to triumph on that. If that's the case, do you remember Jim? He didn't say it. I'll try to find that out.
You're good.
Yeah.
Starting to do.
So I feel pretty confident. Hopefully I'm not being too optimistic, but I think we're gonna.
I've been pretty confident about this whole thing, and every time something else comes out in the paper, I'm like, seriously? serious, one more time.
Well, there was a blow today or yesterday, you know,
Yesterday.
the governor vetoed their funding, so.
Well, this is the third time, and the other two
Yeah.
happened when there wasn't any college that was going to be in Loxahatchee Grove, so I don't think we have any exposure there
No.
personally. But,
They're just gonna have to be creative in how they get it done.
yeah.
Sure, I have a question, since he's here.
Who?
I have a question.
Certainly.
We had asked before about angle parking. I mean, I also have one of these tanks, and it just seems easier to go in at an angle and pull out and go into public, you know, versus going square in.
We agree, and we actually looked at a couple different iterations with the angled parking. Problem is when you create the angled parking, you actually increase the amount of pavement because even though they're easier, you're creating a bunch of little triangles and you still have to have a decent sized backup area, even though it's angled. You still have to have roughly an 18 to 20 foot backup area versus the 28. It's not as efficient as you would like. But we did look at a couple different options like that, and it didn't work as well as keeping with the 90 degree, moving the open space like I mentioned, and creating larger areas with larger parking spaces that you can negotiate a little bit easier. We're also not asking, or we're looking to keep wheel stops out of the parking area for two reasons, actually. One, it's easier to navigate. If you've got a larger vehicle, you can go to an area where it isn't parked heavily, and you can flow through a parking space, so it's easier to navigate. And second, they're trip hazards. So,
Oh, and by the way, there is one thing I wanted to say, just kind of give you the ramifications of some of these things. Without getting too much into the specifics, as you know, all these developers have warranted to the town council that they are going to do the road improvements associated as it relates to Okeechobee and as it relates to the road on B Road as it relates to both properties. And they're in the process right now of trying to work out their own formula as to how much each development contributes to that roadwork. But one of the things we have to do, and staff has determined in agreement with them that it should probably occur sometime during the PUD rezonings, but we have to come up with it's looking like a 4-party agreement now. It started out as a 3-party, I think it's a 4-party agreement where we get these down. So when one of them falls behind due to the tabling, you see how that throws everything out of whack. And so that's something that we're going to try to get back on track. So, because those road improvements are very important to town council. And I mean, you know, as it relates to those developments, as you well know.
Lawrence, did you get your question
Yep.
answered?
He had brought it up the last time, but I just wanted to see if I could get anything more or of an explanation, or if it got incorporated.
The other thing I would ask is that, maybe there be, designated spots, like there's motorcycle parking is here and handicap parking is here, and maybe for the, dualies, parking there.
and that's our intent. That is truly our intent to do that. So that they're defined areas that either they're striped differently, or they have some designated signage in an area, but that you could easily decipher that those are larger spaces. So
I guess the last question would be then for staff is that, can we write a parking law? Not we here, the planning and zoning, but can the town?
Sure. I mean,
In other words, if somebody is, parks a smart car in a dually spot, can some appropriate authority call the PBSO and have them come and write a $100 ticket?
Well, if you have just like handicap parking or expecting mom parking or, compact car parking only, if you're designating it through signage, you could enforce it.
And in light of that, that's the perfect kind of action you could take. You could deliberate on that if you want to make a recommendation to town council. Because
Is that zoning thing?
No, as it relates to the parking, because I'll tell you why. As I think maybe Lawrence brought it up earlier, we have this ULDC committee right now that's meeting on a monthly basis that is reviewing all these changes. The way town council has decided to handle it is that we have a number of issues that have been defined in the past, and we're taking most of those issues to this committee as we speak. But, there was some discussion, because I took a noise issue, and some of the council thought, well, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be doing that. I think I had latitude based upon the work authorization we had. Nevertheless, if you brought it to the council's attention, and they agreed with your recommendation, that would then be another work item that would go to this committee for review. And Keith has been before them, he's seen them in action, so he knows how it would work, but, I mean, that would be so as the P&Z board, yes, those are the kind of things that you should identify and tell council when you think you see an issue.
Yeah.
Really good fertile ground.
Are you done? You gonna make a motion to adjourn?
Can I just make one more comment and then we can go, I promise. I know I've been talking a lot, but, I thought you said you were making a motion.
No, I was.
Since
we were kind of arguing, I was just curious if any consideration to turning lanes off of B Road to go east on Southern.
B Road goes east on Southern.
Right, we were just,
Two left.
we were looking at two left lanes. Was that what you said?
We've had every one of the traffic engineers look at that, and I think we brought this up at the last public hearing. Dual lefts, at least from the county's input and our traffic engineers with the timing, dual lefts seem to interfere with traffic and not help traffic. Just because the opposing lefts on B Road coming north and south, if you end up with a dual left, you have to add a cycle to the light. And that's, I mean, I had never thought about that until the traffic engineers came up with this and said, wait a minute, I mean, there's no other way you can do it. They said, no, you've got to have another cycle. So if you do that, you're actually slowing the traffic down. If you can keep opposing lefts going full flow, then you help your stacking much better. Now, I'm probably the most concerned about this because the first traffic impact is my entry. And the last thing I want is people stacking past my entry. So those are things that, we're all looking at very diligently. Now, I probably shouldn't even mention this, but I will. DOT is looking at a joint use agreement with...
I was going to talk about it, but go ahead, you jumped into it, so that's fine.
The joint use agreements for the ponds on the school site. And this is a good thing for everybody involved. It's the closest way to get to the ponds from the roadway improvements, and they're working out, or trying to work out some issues so that they can get enough storage on site to handle what DOT needs. One of the things that the college has asked for to help alleviate some of the traffic impacts is a full median opening at their main entry as well. So, I mean, they would like this DOT because it's a SIS roadway. It's one of those key escape routes. They have been looking how to limit those access points, but the college is trying to do a horse trade to get it. If that happens, you'll have one more spot of left turn ability out that entry.
What's the distance between B Road and that?
I think it's like 800 feet plus or minus.
So you'd have two traffic lights within 800 feet.
One would be on demand just when classes are there, and the other would be a regular signal at peak. So, yes, it's a little difficult, and I'm saying I'm not saying that that's 100% possible, but I just wanted to throw it out there that they are trying to do that negotiation right now. And it would be a plus if they can get it. I mean, we all agree on that, but that's certainly not something that's a positive.
I'll just tell you real quickly, on May 8th, FDOT finished the pond siting, the project, and as Joe started to tell you, what they did is in that particular, they try to get one pond site in each of their basins. In that basin, the first and third choices were both on the college property. The second choice was actually his property, and we kind of pointed the FDOT to the fact that they really should talk because they do have water feature toward the back of the property, so they need to have a discussion. Another property in one of the other basins was Nancy Drysdale's property on that frontage, and so I mean there were a lot. Unfortunately, the town was not happy with the way it ended up because we had asked them to consider some of the ponds more toward Clucking Canal Road in the back. And apparently the maintenance folks at FDOT didn't like that because they had to run more pipe and do more things. And So in their matrix, which was very sophisticated as far as how they allocated points and everything, the way it ended up, unfortunately, all the properties close to Southern were the ones that were selected. So, and we can provide you more information on that if you're interested, but that's what happened, and that's how it's impacting Southern right now.
Provide a map.
I have that, I can do that.
Yeah, the college makes the best choice because they can integrate it into their stormwater system, and it won't look like your standard DOT issued postage stamp. I mean, it'll just be part of their
Like the
learning
ones
zone.
on Southern, east of the Turnpike.
Yes.
Okay, Jamie.
Well, I just wanted to say it was a great meeting, and I know that I get kind of technical, and I forget the term we use, but it made me laugh. I thought it was good. But I think it's really important that as a board, we have to remember to separate out the feelings, and I mean, I was brought to tears watching the video, I was thinking, oh my God, please turn that off. Because the reality is, it had nothing to do, and they had nothing to do with the decisions and what we were talking about tonight. And I would hope that Jim, as our staff person,
Nothing to do.
that when this goes to our town council, that is pointed out as well. Because I remember when they came forward initially, I hate to look like the bad guy, because I do love dogs and I love animals and I love what it is that they're doing, but we have to be consistent. I mean, I know we're a new community and we're going through growing pains and whatnot, but we have to be consistent. So that would be a great thing if when we do this in front of our town council, we point out that this has nothing to do with them, that while they're the applicant, that we're talking about the language that's in our codes.
Yeah, from a staff
No
perspective.
puppy movies.
No puppy movies. I think that's so inappropriate. It's like, you know, when they're trying to collect for, who was it that they used to go to, UNICEF or whatever, and they make you watch those movies and you're going into your pocket and you're handing out the money and.
Well, from a staff perspective, their basic request made a lot of sense to us. And we just tried to come up with the best way to make the most sense out of what they wanted that we could, and protect the properties in town and not create a situation where they could be abused.
I think we got there, though, but I think it's important to be on the record as saying that it's not about them. It's about, you know, the words that are on this paper that are in the book. And it could be about anybody, any dog kennel that wants to, or rescue person that wants to come. So that was,
Move to adjourn.
yes, I moved. Second.
All right. Adios.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all.